Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, Winter Railway Adventures, Episode 110, The Faulty Coupling. Duke was resting in a siding one morning in the yard. Sir Handel and Peter Sam were shunting some trucks, and they were arguing. "Sir Topham Hatt told me to take those trucks," said Sir Handel. "Give them to me." "Absolutely not," replied Peter Sam. "They are already coupled to me. I'm taking them to the airfield." "Would you two be quiet for once?" said Duke. "All you young'uns do is complain about how hard the work is. Before I came to your railway, when it was the three of us, I worked somewhere else. That railway was poor. Would you like to hear the story?" "Of course not. I can't fall asleep on the job, you know." "Hee hee, good one, Sir Handel." Just then, Rusty arrived. "I would love to hear your story, Duke," he said. So would Peter Sam and Sir Handel. "What? No!" "Yeah, no way." "Then that's settled," said Duke, smiling. "Let's see, where do I begin? Oh, yes, I remember a perfect place to start a story that will teach you two a lesson. It was many years ago on a railway that no longer runs. I was working as a shunter in the yard. Sometimes other engines came through, but I rarely noticed them. I had to keep focused on my work. I had been shuffled around from railway to railway in the years before that, and my driver kept on telling me it was because everybody thought I was lazy. He was a mean person, always blaming me for everything that went wrong. He once blamed me for causing an accident because the coupling snapped one time, but I wasn't the one who coupled the train together, was I? I remember the incident like it was yesterday. The weather was damp and cold, and the other engines in the shed were scared. They had been told that the railway was going to shut down, and that if we weren't sold in another month, we would be scrapped. I, meanwhile, didn't care one bit. I had been shuffled among the worst railways for a long time, and so I was used to the words about the railway closing. The best thing I thought I could do in the meantime was work hard. Maybe if somebody came to look at the engines and saw me working, he would pick me instead. But my driver was a pain. He was arrogant and selfish. He wanted me to pull the best trains on the line, but since this railway was run down, the best he could persuade the owner to let me do was shunt. The trucks and coaches weren't troublesome at all. They knew that we engines worked hard and didn't have time for silliness. My driver always wanted me to take the best trains, so when he had a chance, he always volunteered me to pull freight trains. One day he came to my shed and said that we were going to take some old tankers. I had seen these before. They were so old and hadn't moved from a siding in so many years that cobwebs had rooted them to the track. "But why?" I asked. "Can't I just take the day off? The railway closes in 3 days." "I heard some owners were going to come and look at the engines today," he said. "You would look fantastic pulling that train. Then maybe I can get a job as an assistant on another railway, get rich, retire early, and live comfortably for the rest of my days." Of course he thought that. He always thought about himself before he was concerned about me. But I didn't have a choice at all. I puffed away sadly. When we arrived in the yard, the train was ready. One of the other engines must have prepared it. We set off quickly. "Be sure to go by the station," said my driver. "That's where the owners are eating lunch. Then I can convince them that I'm a good assistant and you're a good engine, I guess." I was so mad at him that I could have slapped him across the face 100 times, if of course I had hands. But there was trouble as we made our way toward the station. A coupling must have snapped on a passenger train, and a coach was left stranded on the line. The passengers were trying to warn my driver that there was trouble, but he was so focused on planning a speech for the owners, they ignored my protest about stopping. He only increased my speed. The passengers jumped out of the way just in time. I came zooming around the bend and smashed into it. The coach shattered upon impact, and since we were on a viaduct, the whole train came tumbling down after me. The owners came out and looked at the mess. My driver came running down a few minutes later and stood on my tender and explained what a silly engine I had been. "He's always trying to go fast when I tell him to stop. Bad engine, Duke, bad engine. You know better than that." I would have replied, but my boiler had exploded on the impact, and it made me feel sick to my stomach. While my driver walked away talking to the owners, I was left to sit in the rubble and wait until help arrived. The mess took hours to clean up, but luckily an engine came and took me away. I wonder what ever happened to all those freight cars and coaches that had been smashed. Oh well, at the time, the only thing I was concerned about was the engine taking me away to get repaired. So what happened? Asked Rusty once the story had finished. My owner repaired me, but I wasn't ready in time when the railway closed. Instead, he took me to the city and sold me for 1/10 of what I was worth. It was a miserable time in my life. However, it was enough money for him to get a job and forget about me. I was sold to Sir Handel and Peter Sam's railway, and you know the rest. What happened to your driver? Asked Peter Sam. Oh, he became the assistant of one of the wealthy owners. He used me to get him propelled into a job. He was one of the meanest person I have ever met. I wonder what ended up happening to him. Well, that's not fair. Yeah, he took advantage of you. You were sold away and he became rich. Well, said Duke, some things in life just aren't fair. You have to get over it. Anyway, you two better get back to work quickly. Sir Topham Hatt will be wondering where you are. Sir Handel rushed off quickly, and Peter Sam shortly followed. Goodbye, Duke, he said, and thanks so much for the story. Rusty smiled. It was nice of you to tell him a story, Duke, but when did you become such a good storyteller? I'm not a good storyteller. I'm a good liar. What? You lied to them just to prove a point? Yep, that's what you need to do to get their attention. Well, Duke, your driver must have rubbed some of that rudeness off on you before he went to go talk to the owners. And the two of the engines laughed happily.